Welcome back to another episode of Training Well Done, your podcast on the what, the why, and the how of quality training. I'm your co-host, Coach Donald,
I'm Coach Tim.
and welcome to our episode on lactic threshold. Today we're going to talk about what is lactate threshold. This has been a fun one to do some research on. But what's up, Coach? It's been a few weeks since we recorded.
Yeah,
Several
it,
weeks,
it,
actually.
it feels like forever since we were out last week with the storm. So hopefully we can get right back in the groove and it won't be as terribly awkward as the first time we
Yeah.
tried.
Did you run last week?
So I ran before the snow came down, and then today was the first day that I got back out there since the snow came down, and it is still a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's so sunny and it's weird because I think it's now like in the 20s, but this morning it was like 6 degrees and icicles were starting to still melt and drip
Mm-hmm.
from the sun being out.
Yeah. I'm typically good with the cold weather. I can deal with that. Um, I could tolerate that pretty well. It was just the slick patches with the ice and
Mhm.
the jumping back and forth between the sidewalks to the streets and this, that, and the other thing. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna lift and spend some time on the bike instead.
Yeah, I imagine like as I didn't run this last week because there's just too much ice on the ground, too much snow, and I feel like in the past when I've tried to do that, I can't really get as much of a workout in as I'd want. The run is not peaceful mentally, and there's not a long enough stretch of clear road where I can like run fast, which kind of defeats the 2 points of me going out for a run. I can't just have a nice easy run because I'm stressed trying to like not fall, or I can't actually run sustainably hard. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
just want to stay inside.
You know what? I totally agree with you. It's almost like, what's the point? What what am I doing? I'm not getting anything out of this. It's definitely not a hard workout. It's definitely not a relax, clear your mind sort of easy
Hmm.
run. It's just like you're stressed out, you're anxious, you're just
Yeah.
trying to stay upright. Um, it's I got to I hated to admit it, but I did get a decent workout on the bike inside yesterday.
You. But I did a treadmill workout last week. Where did you get the shirt? I don't recall seeing this white GHP shirt.
This was from our last online apparel
Okay.
piece. Um, that's all right. It's not as heavy duty as I thought it was going to be, but
Like you thought it was gonna be warmer?
I don't think not even warmer, just heavier
Oh,
in
like it's
in
lighter.
general. It's just like a lighter blend, but I don't know. It was a good long sleeve option. It was a decent price point. So,
Yeah, we gotta maybe we'll plug that in here somewhere. We have
oh,
a
true.
apparel store that I need to do a much better job of like promoting. I need to like get some more gear in the gym. But speaking of, I guess support the podcast, right? We're gonna remember to plug the webinar at the beginning. We have a webinar, strength training for runners. It's a webinar goes over how to do strength training exercises, how to put together strength training workouts for runners, as well as talking about plyometrics, how to fit those in. It's pretty like full service webinar that is on demand. So if you click the link in the show or go to our website, www.ghperformance.com, you can get this webinar. It's 1 hour and it'll tell you a lot that you need to know to be able to get started with doing strength training to support your running. All right, so we want to talk about some coaching moments before we get into our episode. As we were talking about, we've been indoors
Mm.
all week last week. And so we did our trackside program for the distance group indoors, which I really only do if we really have to do it because I like being out there. Those kids like being out there, but we just had to go inside, and that's been a really fun challenge. But I think the workouts are harder now.
Yeah.
So that's the reception I'm getting from the kids, and just looking at the workout, I'm like, oh, I know that's hard. I did a variation of one on Thursday, and I was like this is hard because then the rower is still there. So what we've been
Mm.
doing, we'll use the rower, the flat treadmill, and the wood weight treadmill. And so we'll do interval sprints on the wood weight treadmill, and depending on what qualities we're trying to train, we might change like how fast they are. But one of the sample workouts might be 30 seconds sprinting on the woodway, 90 seconds rest, and they're doing that back and forth. I think they were doing about 10, like anywhere from 6 to 10 of those.
Okay.
Up 10 was the highest. Then on the flat treadmill, we put it on a small incline. And then the one of the workouts we did like an easy run, but the last one on Saturday, we did it. I forget what pace it was for them, but they did it at a much like faster pace. And so they were like running fast for 5 minutes, and then they would hop off, come do a strength training exercise, go back on, do another 5 minutes hard, hop off, and then they would do a you go, I go on a rower, anywhere from either 1 minute, or we did it also with a 150-meter row. So then it was
Okay.
just more about competitively beating the distance each time, or
Sure.
beating the time each time. And they would pair off with that. And just doing all three of those stations, it was tough.
I bet. I when I saw your notes from Saturday, I wasn't in the gym on Saturday morning, but between the strength and movement classes and then having the distance or all the like the sprinters and the runners in the gym to do that thing, and like coming off of that workout on Wednesday where you had them go through the rotation, I was like, that must have been such a cool way to spend time on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Orchestrating all of that.
This week, I had to rewrite. I wrote up the workouts to fit our kind of February training, because those were they all skewed more towards either repeat interval sprints or like VO2 max work, which is what we were finishing out January with, to try to fit in what we're going to talk about, lactic threshold, because that's going to be also our trackside theme for February, and like fitting in ways to do these longer intervals. So this is going to be a fun experiment that I guess we're going to have to talk about either on the next episode that we record or just on the ride back to the gym.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting. I'm excited to see how tonight goes. Like now that you've sort of laid the groundwork and fleshed out that formula for being inside, it'll be neat to see. We've had the adult trackside group in the gym as well for the past several weeks, and we like to start in the gym and then do all of our skill work or drills and warm up and things like that in the gym, and then go outside for the workout. But obviously we had to stay inside this past week as well. But I wanted to shout out some of our new adult trackside members. They have been picking up this stuff, especially the drill based work, really, really well. And I'm not going to name names. I don't want to call anybody out on the podcast, but I just wanted to highlight some of the new people. You know who you are. That the learning curve was pretty big right off the bat, but they stuck with it, and in the matter of a week or two, they already look like they've been doing it for, I'm not gonna say forever, for at least a few months.
Okay, that's awesome.
So it's cool to see that. It's cool to see such rapid progress in like a more mature, an older athlete, and someone who does not have the background. It's been really neat to see their growth in a short period of time.
Who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. I'm trying to teach this old dog at my house to not get on the couch. It's not working when I'm not home.
That's just a losing battle.
Losing battle. 13-year-old Pitts, very cuddly, but they're just not going to do that.
You got to be home all
I just like
constantly
fence off the living room when I'm not home. But yes, we got to just be home. But anyways, let's talk about some training myths. So we got a few things to chat with here. As people hear like lactic threshold. First of all, as far as something, what we want you to understand today, listener or viewer, is what lactic threshold is and then how it affects you. And so you've probably, if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably heard of lactic threshold. And you're like, oh my God, all the lactic in there and it's burning and all this stuff. So I want to cover 3 myths to go through. 1, lactic acid, LAH, understanding how it is in the body. Your body, very briefly, for the smallest inkling of time, creates LAH. It very quickly and almost instantaneously dissolves into, or disassociates, I should say, into lactate and free hydrogen ions. Lactate is literally like milk sugar, in a way, if you want to think of it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
People that are lactose intolerant, like it's milk sugar. It's a type of sugar, and that is a byproduct of glycolysis. The hydrogen ions is what's causing you the problem, but it is scientifically inaccurate to run around like, oh, all the lactic acid in my muscles. That's not necessarily what you're feeling. You are feeling the hydrogen ions building up. That's causing acidity that is painful. It is. I don't want to say it's semantics because it's actually science. It's not semantics, but it might feel like semantics, and it's colloquially easier to call it lactic acid. But understand, you feel the hydrogen ions by themselves building up, not necessarily the LAH.
Yeah, we've made this distinction before, and it is, like you said, it's a colloquialism. Oh, the lactic acid is building up, and my legs are burning as a result of that. But I think in order to understand what we're going to discuss, today, or to more fully understand and comprehend what we're going to discuss today, and then in our next episode, it's important to understand the distinction here.
Now, myth number 2 is actually outlandish.
Hmm.
Soreness is not leftover lactic acid. If we just establish that the lactic acid dissociates very quickly and your body, we'll talk about the buffering later. Soreness is not lactic acid. If you are sore the next day, it's not because there's lactic acid built up and all that. It is micro tears in your muscle from hard training and from just exercise, period, that is causing inflammation. And you feel that, and your nerves feel that. Soreness usually doesn't even hurt. It's just, it's,
Mm-hmm.
I describe it as this feeling that's uncomfortable. You kind of want to stretch it, but you love talking about it. There's something about being sore that you just can't shut up about.
I said this. I swear, Coach, I said this yesterday morning. My wife has a good routine. She like runs, cycles, strength trains, and does it in roughly like that cycle, unless things dictate otherwise. And every so often, I'll uh, I'll just like keep eyes on one of the strength training sessions that she does, and and the instructor happened to make just like they was demonstrating an exercise, and then just happened to make a comment about I was sore. I did deadlifts yesterday, and I just lost it. And I told her, I was like, that's everybody. Like that's everyone always wants to tell you what they did yesterday and why they're sore. It's so funny you bring that up. It's very timely.
I love it. And that's how you know you're not injured. Because if it hurts, you don't want to talk about it.
Truth.
If you're a youth athlete, you're probably going to avoid talking about it, or you're going to blow it out of proportion because you're really trying to get out of something. Because whereas if you're sore, it's like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
But it's not lactic acid. It might be a badge of honor, but it is not lactic acid. Number 3, lactic is not bad. It's just there. I don't know what this word is. I wrote in this note, but it is just there, right? If I were to be flip about this, it's really just your body recycling milk sugar. You're actually going to use that lactic later. Whenever your body dissociates that, the lactic gets put back in the bloodstream, and then it goes to your liver to get reprocessed as glucose.
Yeah, it's something we're gonna dive into a little bit more. So I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but like you know lactate as a fuel substrate is a pretty cool concept.
And I think for a lot of people that train a lot, that is actually something that they don't know, they don't think about. That is, I think, one kind of layer veil down of like, oh, wait, the lactic acid that I'm so worried about, my body actually uses lactate. It's like, yes. And part of your performance as an endurance athlete is how well can you actually do that?
Yeah, how well can you recycle it?
So let's hop into our deep dive. We're going to go on a journey talking about lactic threshold, exactly about the accumulation of lactate and hydrogen ions, buffering, We're going to talk about why it burns, and we're going to talk about what happens when you keep training past it. And then our next episode, we're going to talk about how do you actually train this as we close out our series on endurance running.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is lactic threshold? Lactic threshold is the point at which your body's ability to buffer buffer acid is matched by the amount of acidity that builds up. So this is measured in millimoles, and everybody's gonna have a different amount of this to some extent. But let's say I'm just gonna throw a number out there. Your lactic threshold is 4 millimoles. Below that number means that your body can buffer all of the lactic acid. Oh, gosh, I'm gonna just use lactic acid. I'm gonna try to go back and forth and try to I'm gonna try to stick with acid, but we're talking about lactic, so it's just tough. The colloquialisms. I'm gonna start this over. Below that 4 number means that your body can buffer out the acidity buildup well beyond the accumulation that's building up, which means that below that, you're going to be fine. Once you hit your lactic threshold, that means that your ability to buffer out the acid is matched by how much is accumulating. Usually means that you're running harder, you're running longer, you might be running out of fuel reserves, and so it's causing a bit more of a anaerobic push.
Mm-hmm.
And above that means that your body can no longer buffer out the accumulated acid. And so then your body is on a timer to start shutting down, at least from that level of performance.
Right. Can you just, for the listeners or viewers here, before we get any further, do you want to explain just really quickly, because I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but just give an idea of like what we mean when we say buffering the acid?
Yes. So when we think about buffering the acid, your body actually delivers its own basically bicarbonate. Let me make sure I got this stated correctly. So like the body has a bicarbonate buffering system. And I was going to talk more about this in a second, but we're going to bring it up now. And it uses what I like to call its own baking soda. I like to say it sprinkles it on there like Parmesan cheese on spaghetti when you're out of the restaurant, and it sprinkles it on there, right, to help buffer out the acid. Does it look like that? Probably not, but that's my visual for you on how that works. And so your body will then buffer this to then help clear it out.
Yeah, so I didn't want to jump too far ahead, and we can certainly dive more into this when we get to that section, but I just think like for people who, as they're trying to understand this, if we use that like that number 4, right? Like that's your homeostasis, that's your equilibrium. That's when the buildup of acidity is perfectly, or, I mean, reasonably perfect to your body's ability to clear out that acidity. And you're either falling on one side of the spectrum or the other, or you're trying to ride that very, very thin razor's edge, which we'll save that for the next episode.
Yes.
But the buffering is the quote unquote clearing out of the acidity.
And if you actually have a lactic threshold of 4, that's pretty decent, by the way. So now, how do we measure this, Coach? Generally, this is going to be measured scientifically by a blood draw. The reason it's called a lactic threshold is when you do the blood draw, you're measuring blood lactic levels. And there's a 1-to-1 relationship between blood lactic levels and the acidity in the muscle. That's why we think of it colloquially as lactic acid, because, well, in order to figure out the acidity, you need to figure out the blood lactic levels. And so there is a relationship there that as your body goes through metabolism, that builds up. That is, also, as we talk about, we could talk about this. Actually, now is a good. Oh, yeah,
that's a helpful way to measure, so you don't have to take a muscle biopsy all the time, right?
Get a blood draw. Now, do you need to get a blood draw? Probably not. There are ways that you can like train to test this out. Now, how does this accumulate? So if we look at this lactic and acidity buildup, this happens through the process of your metabolism. Particularly, we're talking about aerobic respiration. And so what happens, so there's this process called glycolysis, okay? And glycolysis is where your body takes glucose, puts it in a muscle cell, and does a bunch of chemical processes to get ATP. I think we've talked about this before.
We have.
Adenosine triphosphate. It's the basically Earth's and our living organism's way of producing energy. You take this molecule that is basically this adenosine molecule with these three phosphates, and you split one off, and it releases a lot of energy when it does that. And it powers literally everything in your body. Well, you could take glucose, put it through glycolysis, and you can pretty quickly get some ATP. You have a byproduct from that called pyruvate. And when it comes to aerobic respiration, that pyruvate goes through what is called the Krebs cycle. And this cycle produces a lot of ATP. A lot of ATP. I believe it's somewhere to the tune of 18 times more ATP than glycolysis. But it takes a lot longer to do that. And then you have this next step where your byproducts are going to go into the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, to go through the electron transport chain, which helps produce some more ATP. And so this whole process helps produce a lot of energy for the body. And when if you're running at a really high level and you're trying to churn through all of this glucose or trying to build up all this energy, is sometimes you can produce more. There's a byproduct of that, which is these hydrogen ions, and your body has to be able to get rid of those. So that is partly how this accumulation works out. That's part of the like cellular respiration that goes on. So you take the glucose, you go through the glycolysis, you go through the Krebs cycle, you go to the electron transport chain, and that's where the oxygen comes into play. Everything actually before the Krebs cycle, actually before the electron transport chain, does not require oxygen. You literally just take the glucose. You can think of it like a sewing person. You're kind of going through like one of those like sewing wheels or something like that. And I don't know if this is a great analogy, but you're going through the sewing needle and you can pull energy off, and then you go into a bath, perhaps. And so now the bath, you take the byproduct of that and you put the oxygen on there and you drain it out, and then you have all this energy. I'm trying to think through what I imagine like dyeing a piece of cloth is. You sew it and then you dye it,
okay,
and then you come out. That's the analogy that just popped.
Now I'm picking up on your thread.
Hopefully, hopefully that helps.
So there is a cost associated with energy production, and that is the acidity.
Yes,
and that's that threshold is what we're talking about.
So your body, as it goes through this, as you like are trying to perform, like maybe you're racing a half marathon, maybe you're running even the 400, your body is needing this really, really high energy demand, and well, there's a cost to it. Your body's able to train its ability to like clear this out and buffer this out. And so let's talk about buffering. And so
I jumped ahead a little bit on this one just to make sure that we were had a clear understanding, but now we can unpack it in a little bit more detail.
I got to use my notes here. So buffering, like I mentioned, you take the bicarbonate, your baking soda, you sprinkle it on the muscles to help get rid of the acidity that's building up. So what is this? So it's a reversible reaction against between carbon dioxide, water, carbonic acid, bicarbonate ions, Basically, as the hydrogen builds up, your bicarbonate HCO3 then combines with the excess hydrogen ions to form carbonic acid. And then the carbonic acid breaks down into water in CO2, aka pee in breathing out.
Uh-huh.
And that is what then allows you to get rid of it. So that's also partially why you're breathing so hard when you run,
Right.
because you take the baking soda on there, turns it into a little acid, and then your body breaks the acid down into water and carbon dioxide, and you breathe it off.
I bet you that just blew a lot of people's minds. Like, oh my gosh, that's why I'm breathing so heavily when I run
Yeah.
faster.
Just throughout your regular life, the carbon dioxide is the byproduct at the end of all these steps. Like you're dealing with this right now while you listen to the show,
Right.
but it is just at a super level once you're actually training hard. Just letting that kind of sink in there. So that is and your lactic threshold, I'm sorry, the lactate goes into the bloodstream, goes to the liver and turns into more glucose. So that's the buffering aspect. Let's talk about why it burns when you're beyond lactic threshold. When you are, again, training really hard, you have all of this hydrogen ion buildup. Eventually, you hit a point where your body can no longer adequately buffer out the acid that's building up. You don't have enough bicarbonate that is being able to come in to actually clear this. And so it starts to build up. The acidity in the muscle then starts to create a situation where it's harder to contract and it's starting to become like very uncomfortable. Your form will start to break down. You can mentally, quote unquote, whoosh, lock in to do better, but eventually you are going to falter, and it's just going to be hard to maintain your running economy. It's going to be hard to stay focused, even, and so it starts to become really uncomfortable. Coordination's off. Your ground contact time is probably going to start going up. Your technique's going to degrade, and also your body is trying to tell you to stop, and so you're getting nervous signals to be like, bro, chill, this is too much.
The wheels are coming off.
Yeah. So that's part of, like, I don't know if you want to share about kind of your thoughts when you're training and like that feeling of what's going on, and even just kind of hearing us talk about this. How's that relating to your experiences when you've gone beyond the veil?
Yeah, so I feel like we're gonna get into a lot of that in part two of this in the next episode. But one thing that popped into my head that I think we might want to address here now is I'm trying to think of a good example to use that would be accessible for everyone, but I'm not coming up with one. So I'm just gonna use um I'm just gonna use like a 6 minute mile, right? Um, if you can run a 6 minute mile, but the wheels start to come off after that, and you're running with someone who can run a 6 minute mile for 2 miles, there's there's a difference the in the fitness, but not in the way that people would think of it, where they're like, "Oh, I'm out of shape. I can't run that fast." Because you did just run that fast. You just didn't run that fast for as long as you just only ran that fast for half as long as this other person, right? So the fitness that we're referring to when it comes to this lactate or lactic threshold training is a very specific kind of fitness, which is different from a lot of the other components of fitness that we've spoken about previously on this podcast, right? Fitness, in my mind, is it's multifactorial, and it's not as clear cut as like you're either in shape to do something or you're out of shape to do something. You might have two of three pieces, right? And this might be the last piece.
Mm.
That was a little long-winded,
No,
but
but it makes sense. So I was listening to a podcast earlier, and I got a screenshot of this because we talked about running economy, but I just learned something new that about the measurement of running economy. And let's see.
you get a new phone, or is that just a new
Oh, I
case?
did get a new phone. Me and Leslie had to go and like get on the same phone plan because I guess her sister's kicking her off,
Got it.
and like she has to get on my phone plan, which means like I had to just basically get a new phone plan overall.
Right.
And where is this
But they
stinking
probably gave you
video?
that for free then, right?
Uh,
Or quote
Almost for
unquote
free.
free.
I got
Yeah.
like a I don't know 90% discount on
Yeah.
this, so we both actually got new phones. I'm trying to find this freaking screenshot. Oh my gosh, like where is it at? I'm just in the middle of the podcast screaming about a
I
screenshot.
need to get a new phone because mine like just doesn't charge anymore or
Ugh.
doesn't hold a charge.
Um,
But I have a tendency to lose and or break phones when
yeah.
I travel. And we've got some travel coming up in March, so I'm trying to hold off until after that because I don't want to get a new phone
Mm-hmm.
and then just like drop it off a cliff somewhere.
So, basically, you mentioned what you mentioned. There's like these big three that we've been talking about throughout the series:
Right.
running economy, VO2 max, and lactic threshold. So, running economy is not just about like the subjective idea of how well you can run. It is tied to VO2 max, and for any given, how do I say this well? I'm gonna have to come back to this on a future episode whenever I can clearly articulate this because I am at the edge of my understanding for that based off of the new thing that I learned. Let's say it is caught like you're running at VO2 max. Let's say you're running below VO2 max and the speed you're running at
Okay.
is like 50 milliliters per kilogram per minute at that particular speed. Well, what it was saying is for a given distance, you and I spend about the same amount of oxygen costs to cover the distance. So, for let's say 2 miles, it'll take us the same amount. But at any given speed, running economy is more about the time, whereas VO2 max is also about the distance, but running economy is more about how much oxygen I'm sorry, running economy is how much oxygen you spend to cover a certain distance.
Right.
VO2 max is about how much oxygen you spend to cover a certain time
Time.
frame.
Yep.
And so for you and I, the distance can like be the how am I saying this correctly? I might be saying this wrong. I'm just wasting all this time on the show. Um
No. I track, and
I also have a computer in front of me.
I think what we're trying to if I'm following your line of reasoning here, I think what we're trying to say is that when we do talk about running efficiency and economy, we kind of talk about the we focus on the biomechanical components. If you listen to those episodes, you'll know that. But maybe what you're trying to say is that running economy, I guess by definition, is then a function of VO2 max and lactate threshold.
So, well, to an extent, lactic threshold is a bit different because it does measure that. And like running at lactic threshold is a lower percentage of VO2 max because since VO2 max is the ceiling
Uh huh.
for your body's like aerobic respiration. So it's during all out, what's the
Right.
maximum amount of oxygen you can utilize to train and get through a bout of training or exercise. Like that is that. Um, Running economy is how much oxygen you need to run at a specific speed. Bingo, there we go. And so for you and I running a 6 minute mile, if you have better running economy, it costs you less
Less
oxygen
oxygen.
to run at a 6 minute mile, whereas it'll cost me more oxygen to run at a 6 minute mile. And so that's where that difference is, and that's what the thing was trying to say. I just had to like
Okay.
look that up.
Yep. I follow you now.
So VO2 max being like how much oxygen you can use when you're like kind of at your peak, when you're like redlining, you're seeing red. Running economy being more when you are not running very fast, or you're running at a certain speed, how much oxygen does it take to run at that speed?
Yeah.
Which ties more towards
Yeah,
VVO2 max.
I was gonna
They were
say because
basically
I want
kind
to
of a
talk
different ways
about
to say that.
yeah, I want to talk about the relationship between VVO2
Yeah.
max and lactate
Whereas
threshold.
lactic threshold, you can look at what speed can you run at that threshold line or below. Which,
Uh-huh.
when we talk about training threshold, then you're looking at paces that put you very close to it, that train your body to be able to buffer it better.
Uh-huh.
Because again, part of the training process for your body is when you are doing something and you are at the edge of your ability to do it, your body then has to regroup during your recovery time to say, how can we do this better so that I don't get my chest kicked in so bad the next time?
Yeah, maybe we need to add that to one of the myth busting sections for the next episode. Is like that's why these crash and burn effort like it's not heroic to crash and burn
Oh, yeah.
during a lactate training threshold.
Yeah.
I mean, you're working hard. You're fried. You don't get me wrong. You're fried by the end of it, but you can get through it, and that's the point.
Yeah. One of the ways that Jack Daniels like to put this is it's comfortably hard.
Mm-hmm.
VO2 max work can get to be uncomfortably uncomfortable, um, especially when you run like or like actually when you're hitting it really hard. But like lactic threshold work should be uncomfortable. Like you look forward to it ending, but it's not like it's that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like you want it to be over with, but like keep going. Whereas some of the harder intensities, you look forward to them ending as soon as you begin them.
Yeah.
So let's kind of recap here. So lactic threshold, this is the balance between your accumulation of hydrogen ions and the buffering that happens to make it go away. We want to be mindful of the fact that this is happening while Coach Tim and I are just sitting here. Our bodies are building up hydrogen ions and buffering them away. How does this accumulate? As you go through the Krebs cycle and as you go through glycolysis, both of these processes, I didn't say this earlier, result in hydrogen ion accumulation. So as you go through the Krebs cycle, you have a buildup of hydrogen ions. As you go through glycolysis, before you even get there, there's a buildup of glycolysis. I'm sorry, a buildup of glycolysis. Gosh, a buildup of hydrogen ions. When you are doing something really hard, let's say the 400-meter dash or the 800-meter dash, or running the mile as hard as you can, you are using up ATP so fast that there is this huge buildup of hydrogen ions, which is in part why those events are so painful, why you can start hitting the wall if you don't train well or pace well for those things. When you are actually using ATP. So whenever the ATP splits and becomes ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate, there's hydrogen ion release that goes on in that process. That builds up. When you're doing something really intense, that builds up very fast. And so your body has to be able to buffer that. That's why when you are, usually for a lot of people, a anywhere from 30 to 60-minute run, you can, if you hit a certain pace, you can be at your lactic threshold. Usually, if you're running like a really hard 5K or a really hard 2 mile or 1 mile, you're way above lactic threshold. It's just a matter of the event might be over with before you've had to tap out. You have other things like when it comes to running the mile, like how fast you actually are, how fast of a speed you can run at relative to your VO2 max, how well your running economy is when you're running the mile. Those things are going to matter a lot. Whereas once you start getting into the 10K half marathon range, the actual racing pace is going to be much closer to your lactic threshold. And so those are going to be the paces you want to think about even for training that. But when you're running below that, you are having this huge accumulation buildup that goes on, but the race might be over before you actually need to have that cleared, and you're going to run into some other limitations that relate to that performance before the lactic threshold will.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, right? Because in those shorter distances, you know you're digging yourself into a hole, but you also know if you time it right, the race is going to be over before you have to crawl back out of that hole,
That particular hole, at least.
that particular hole.
So we also talked about the buffering. How does buffering work? So we have our baking soda that we sprinkle on the muscle, like
Parmesan cheese.
Parmesan cheese. It probably actually occurs nothing so beautiful like that. Um, but you have this bicarbonate. So you have your bicarbonate that turns the acid into carbonic acid, which then gets broken down into water and carbon dioxide, which you breathe off. Whenever you are training to an intensity that is beyond what your body can do, you're going to have an overrun of these hydrogen ions that is going to cause a lot of fatigue, a lot of pain. And, let's talk about some of those fatigue byproducts. So you're going to have inorganic phosphate. This also is something that appears as you use up a lot of ATP. You're going to have phosphates that are not being used. The more your body has to start using ADP, that means you are at the end of your energy supplies, because that means that it's struggling to be able to replenish the phosphate to create an ATP, and so now it's using ADP to be able to do that, which eventually turns into having AMP build up, which is adenosine monophosphate. You're going to have reactive oxygen species. Those are, free radicals, as we like to call them in the health and fitness world, that are going to build up. You're going to have potassium that builds up, ammonia. Your body's going to be struggling with calcium, just because part of being able to contract muscles, your body releases calcium in the muscle cell to get the muscles to contract. The whole actin myosin piece, right? The myosin hooks onto the actin, but the calcium is what lets the actin be hooked onto. But then your body has to reabsorb that calcium and then re-release it. And as fatigue builds up, your body's going to struggle to do that process, which then makes muscle contraction happen poorly. Your glycogen is going to decrease, right? So you're going to see that happen in fatigue. Coming back to that calcium thing, fun fact, part of what makes explosive athletes more explosive than other people is that their body can actually reuptake the calcium a lot faster, which is about relaxation. So really powerful lifters, or like especially sprinters and people who do power sports, their body can relax faster than mine, and then that allows them to get another contraction.
Does that come back to that piece that we were talking about in the running efficiency and economy episode, where we were like turning on when you need to turn on and turning off when you?
Not
Is there a
exactly, because
correlation?
kind of, but this happens much faster.
Got it.
So let's say you and pick any of our really fast 100-meter sprinters were to go like race in the 100. Their body is able to, like, the muscles themselves are able to react and recontract faster than yours, which allows them to get higher power output in that span of time.
Got it. Okay.
So that's
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
So that's some of the fatigue that builds up. And if you're running out of ATP to be able to produce, or you're running out of glycogen to do that, you're having these metabolites build up in regards to like maybe the inorganic phosphates or the free radicals. You're just going to make your body not be able to contract muscles very well. And it's going to say stop or slow down to get to a level of where we can replenish things. So we went through all that as far as some of the myths. We went through what lactic threshold is, what lactate is, what the hydrogen ion accumulation is, what lactic acid is and is not, right? It quickly dissociates into that lactate that goes through the bloodstream, and the acidic hydrogen ions that build up. If you remember from chemistry class, HCl, that's your stomach acid, oftentimes, but definitely not always, because this happens with bases too. I do not remember. If you remember, please let us know the difference between a base and a acid on a chemical level, because they both have H's in front of them, but then like I think bases usually have an OH or something like that. I don't remember as well as I would like to, but I know that acids have H's in front of them usually. So, and there's like usually the I think it's usually with like what, like a gas or like a noble gas. I don't remember. I'm getting out of my league right now with chemistry of like when you put a hydrogen ion with certain things, it makes it acidic because it strips electrons from other things. Whereas bases, I think they add electrons. I have a
That
computer. I can look this up.
that sounds right. But again, I'm out of. It's been so long since chemistry class. I'm out of my league. Do we have any people who are like
Emily
chemical
definitely knows. I mean,
engineers?
no, she's not a chemical person. She's just really smart. um,
That's true. She probably does know. We'll crowdsource this. If you know, let us know.
and so we talked about the accumulation of lactate, the accumulation of the acid. We talked about how it's measured, right? You use blood lactic levels to be able to measure this. We talked about the buffering. We talked about why it burns, why it's uncomfortable, and what happens when you keep training beyond your lactic threshold. So, some practical training takeaways that you can roll with. A, training below lactic threshold involves running at paces that don't put you past that limit, which in our next episode, we're going to talk more about what those paces are, what that should feel like. But in general, it's going to be something that's uncomfortable but doable. A lot of running manuals I read say that it's a pace that you should be able to run for longer than 30 minutes, but usually not beyond an hour. Although that's going to also be dependent on how fit you are as a runner.
True.
And then ways to avoid, hitting the wall, which is going to go into training for that, understanding how fast that pace is. If you're doing, let's say you're going out for like a long run, you might have parts of your run where you might go up and touch that,
Yes.
and then you might come back down because you're only going to touch that for a few minutes. As we look at even getting set up for our winter track side, being able to get these 3, 4, 5 minute runs in, but especially, we'll build up to those, but we'll do a lot of 5 minute runs, and then getting into the good parts where you're doing 10 minute runs,
Yup.
repeat 5 minute runs, or 20 minute runs that are running around this pace, to be able to, again, teach your body how to improve its ability to clear the lactate. So what happens is during the training adaptation is that your body can tolerate higher levels of acidity before bad things happen.
Yep.
The acid's going to build up more and more and more, but you have a higher ability to buffer it so you can tolerate more, which then means you can put down more speed. So that's some of the takeaways that you can have from that.
Yeah, I think this is all going to come. I mean, not just what we talked about today, but everything that leading up to this point is going to kind of come full circle in our next episode. But for now, it's like, yeah, your easy run should be easy. Yes, your hard run should be hard. But what kind of hard, and what is the training stim? Like, what is the adaptation that you're actually getting out of that? Because it can be very nuanced on that end of the spectrum. And again, we'll explore that a little bit more later on.
So what we want you to do by the time you listen to this, we'll be getting ready to record episode 11, and we're going to do an Ask Us Anything segment. So please send us an email or a DM to the podcast Instagram, or to donald@ghperformance.com, or to tim@ghperformance.com with questions you'd want us to answer on the show. We're going to get a list of listener questions, and we're going to sit down. We're going to go through them a little bit ahead of time, and I want to sit down and answer those for you.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
We're going to get into another series about metabolism. So I'm going to be busting out the textbook and making sure I'm really well polished for that one. So please make sure that you send those questions in, things that you're interested in. And then we're going to catch you on the next episode talking about how to train to improve your lactic threshold.
Great. That was awesome.
Cool beans.
Send us questions.